So you're wondering about whole grains. Good. Now, pause this video and go get the food list that is part of this entire program. You need to have it in your hands. Go. Okay, let's get ready. So this section, the Energizer section, is the first part of it is really about whole grains, because when you eat pretty much anything on that list, we'll put aside the potatoes and the corn for a second and we'll talk about all the grains. When you eat anything on that list, bread, pasta, crackers, when you're eating rice, any of the whole grains, you're having something that originally came from a farm that grew a grain out of the ground, and these little guys here were picked off the plant as whole grains. That's what they're called. So this one is quinoa, and this one is brown rice. We have things like buckwheat. We have things like oats or oat groats, which is the whole grain. We have things like wheat berries. So there is more than just wheat, flour milled, and rice. There is more. So make sure you are getting the variety of whole grains that you can have, because variety is giving you more superpower behind what that whole grain offers. Now, whole grains are used for sustainable energy. The wholeness of that grain provides some superpowers, but also a casing around the energy that makes it like a slow absorbing energy source, a slow entry of energy into your battery. So you want that if you're not training right away. So if you have 8 hours till you're going to train and you're eating breakfast, you should be looking for that whole grain. So you have this slow absorbing energy coming into your system. It's going to do a lot better like that. It would really be like having your cell phone have a kind of battery charging all through the morning, as opposed to trying to do a quick charge before you leave the house and then running low on that battery as you go through the morning. So having that whole grain for sustainable energy is important. And so let's think about it now. So we have the whole grain coming from that farm, from that plant. If you do take that grain and you cut it up into little millions of pieces and basically grind it into a powder, you would be turning it into a flour. So when you see bags of flour, that's what that is. You are seeing things like whole wheat flour or all-purpose flour or even rice flour. So you will see these ground up grains into itty bitty teeny weeny pieces. So when you make something with flour, you are making something that could have been from the whole grain, but sometimes they do this step before they've made the flour and they actually take off a lot of the outer casing that makes it slower to digest the grain, and actually take off that casing, and then it becomes a refined grain, and we call that like white rice, or we call it the white flour or the all-purpose flour. So that's what you end up with. Now, often we're not just eating and cooking plain flour. We are combining it with ingredients, and we are baking it and cooking it at high temperatures. So there's this other process, and what that does is it breaks down the energy inside the food so that it's even more quickly absorbed. So even using the whole grain flour, when I bake it at 400 degrees in the oven, it's going to release the energy even quicker now than if I hadn't have baked it, and then if I hadn't, versus eating the whole grain. So hopefully that makes sense. So I'm taking you through the process of what happens to the whole grains. And when you do eat a quicker digesting, quicker absorbing energy, it's just going to be this zap, like I said, a little quicker, then you will not have a sustaining energy in your system. So I would advise you, if you're getting close to training, that that's a good thing. If you're far from training, maybe leaning towards more whole grains is a better thing. So you can kind of play with that and get in whole grains at the right time. So we can go even farther than this, but what I want you to start with is experimenting with whole grains and cooking whole grains that maybe you haven't had before. So going through the list, if you have never had quinoa before, that would be a great one to have. Brown rice, oat groats is a really inexpensive one that you can get at a lot of health food stores or little specialty stores. So look for that one. And wheat berries is the actual whole grain wheat, where before it becomes bread and flour, it's this little grain called a wheat berry. So check that one out. They all cook really simply in water, and one of the easiest recipes in the world to make. And in fact, I will have the full guide for you to go through so you can work yourself through all of the how-tos on how to cook whole grains. Enjoy!